Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Haynes. Tonight on Greater Boston, the city has agreed to a multi-million-dollar discrimination settlement in a 2005 lawsuit over the drug hair test, which is prone to false positives among people of color. Plus,
this type of conduct is happening in our neighborhoods.
While federal agents investigate a major prostitution ring in Massachusetts, advocates are pushing to protect sex workers through decriminalization. I'll talk to a pair of them ahead. In a settlement 20 years in the making, the city of Boston is set to pay more than $2.5 million over the use of a drug hair test. It disproportionately turns out false positives for black officers. The lawsuit began back in 2005 after 2 officers were fired, 1 was suspended, and 1 police cadet was prevented from joining the BPD at all after testing positive for cocaine, despite maintaining that they had never used the drug. Attorneys for the group says that clients' lives and careers were completely derailed. One of those attorneys is the litigation director for the Lawyers for Civil Rights, Oren Sellstrom, joining me now, along with Jenifer Lopes, president of the Massachusetts Association of Minority Law Enforcement Officers, or MAMLIO. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. Appreciate you being here. First, I want to ask you, Jeff, about what is this going to mean to the members of MAMLIO, but the officers at the BPD, you think?
I think this sends a message that we are at a place in society where we're going to get true justice for things that have historically held us back as a community of officers of color. And we're at a place now where we're just trying to get to a place of inclusivity, where we feel included, where we can grow just like everyone else, and where we can feel like we're a part of a society that really cares about issues that impact black and brown folks. This is a case that has gone on for way too long, has been fought by multiple administrations, and here we are today with a victory. Yeah,
you know, we're talking about, what, we counted 3 mayors and 1 interim mayor. Oren, this was a lengthy litigation for this outcome.
Absolutely, and as Jeff said, it really went on far too long. It was really in the months after the hair test was first instituted, way back in the early 2000s, when folks like MAMLIO were raising the alarm bells saying this test is unreliable, it should not be used, it's disproportionately falling on African American officers, and yet it took almost 20 years of litigation to get to the victory where we are today. That's way too long. It should have happened much sooner.
So talk to me a little bit, for folks who are not familiar, which I'm not sure how folks aren't, but there's always some folks who may not have been following this case as closely as all of us have. What were some of the circumstances leading up to this lawsuit?
So the basic problem with this hair test is that while it can identify drug particles in the hair, it can't tell how they got there. And so there are 2 ways that drug particles can get into the hair: through internal ingestion, which is through drug use, but also through external contamination. It can come from outside, and it turns out that drug particles are quite prevalent just in our everyday environment. Something like half of all dollar bills in circulation have drug particles on them, and those can get into the hair externally. And this hair test did not reliably identify how those particles got into hair. And it was a particular problem with black officers because of the nature and texture of black hair, as well as grooming products that are commonly used by African Americans. The test disproportionately produced false positives for African American officers. So it was unreliable, it was discriminatory, and it should never have been put into practice in the first place.
Jeff, I'm sure when a police officer, especially a police officer of color, walks into a case or responds to a call, the last thing they want to be worried about is if their hair is going to hold on to whatever drug particles might be in that space.
Absolutely. We all know that police officers walk into situations oftentimes where there can be prevalence of drugs, where people may be using drugs can be in the air, in areas where you're responding where there's a contamination of some sort, and at any point in a police officer's day, they can come across drug particles, right? Whether it's responding to a 911 call, just engaging with a citizen on the street, or even just having lunch and sitting at a restaurant. And so police officers want to feel protected. They want to feel like when they're doing their job, it's not going to adversarially impact them later on. And that's what happened here, right? And the hair test, it cut out a portion of your hair. So if you're someone who historically has had issues growing hair, et cetera, your hair getting cut off once a year had an impact on you and your life.
So every year, officers had to submit to this test?
Yeah, so essentially every single year, officers' hair was getting cut by the Occupational Health Services Department, who would submit it to a lab.
And so was that something that, like, was this something where in the culture of the BPD, like, black officers were ever concerned about?
I think all along black officers were concerned because of the false positives that were alerted early on. But also, we know that certain people have struggles with growing hair, and I know it was always an issue for black women on the police department with their hair being cut and having issues with growing that hair back and really having it impact their everyday lives.
Did it ever cast like a stigma? Like we talked about a cadet, we talked about two officers being fired, one being suspended. When those things would happen, I imagine there would be a lot on the force as folks were talking about it and things like that. Now, is there a sense of vindication because perhaps that person was seen differently after testing positive?
Well, absolutely. Unfortunately, once you test positive for drug use, there is a stigma that comes along with that, right? So it's not like you can just walk away with that and say everything's been fixed and that people aren't going to look at you a certain way. And there are many people out there who don't believe that this is the case, that you can get a false positive, right? But I think where we are today is really showing that science has proved this. Not only we're saying it as an organization, we have our attorneys that are saying it in a court. We have, experts who have come out and said this test is not accurate and positive. And so we're happy that, people who were able to return back to work were able to return back to work, and that today they're working alongside their peers and really showing a message that we're going to be strong through this. We're not going to let a system that has historically marginalized people of color take away our opportunity to serve and protect the citizens of Boston.
Oren, so what happens next? Like, there is this settlement, there's a monetary settlement with the BPD, the city of Boston, but is there any other direction that or steps that the department or the force has to take?
Well, the main change happened in 2020, which is that the city abandoned use of the hair test altogether. So it's not being used now, and it's not going to be used going forward. And that was a significant victory that our clients felt was very important. They knew what this test and the false positives had done to them, and they didn't want to see that happen to anybody else. So in 2020, as part of the movement to end racism, the city abandoned the hair test. Now they have finally come forward and compensated the individuals whose lives were completely turned upside down by the false positives in the first place.
Are there any other cities or even states that implement a similar test? And could this have precedent in any other cases that may be brought? I'm not sure if
there are still places where a version of this test is still in use. And I know that because at Lawyers for Civil Rights, we get calls from people from across the country that read about this case, this victory, and say, hey, that happened to me as well. So it is still in use in other places, fortunately not in the city of Boston.
Could this case then be precedent in other cases?
Absolutely. And the science that Jeff referred to that came out through the course of the litigation is something that people look very closely at now. The fact that the test cannot reliably determine whether drugs are in the hair through ingestion or external contamination. The fact that courts have now held that it is scientifically unreliable. That is all very powerful precedent that is used across the country at this point.
Jeff, I know that, police departments across the country, even the city of Boston, looking to recruit more folks onto the force. Do you think having the abolishment of this test in 2020 being gone, and then now this case, this civil case, this being decided, do you think that that's going to help create an environment where you're going to be able to get more folks on the force?
Yeah, I think any barrier that you can take away from recruiting more officers of color, more female officers, and really bringing in an inclusive working environment is going to be key. I think here where we see a victory is that we know now that we're not going to have false positives with the hair test, right? I think we're at a place where people can feel confident in taking the current urine test and feel comfortable that they're not going to get a false positive. And I think that that tells people that, you know, they're going to have an equal chance and equal opportunity of becoming a police officer in the city of Boston.
I know that there's been other conversations around the test that you take to get on the force and other things that could have discriminatory outcomes or disproportionately discriminatory outcomes for cadets of color. Do we see this as one step of many to make sure that this is an equitable system here?
Absolutely. I think this is just one step of the many hurdles that officers of color have faced in the police department. You know, the recent promotional exam settlement speaks victory to some of the issues that have been presented with promotion in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I think historically police departments have always blamed civil service and said civil service was the reason why they could not promote officers of color you know, to more superior ranks, but we know today that that's not the case. We know that today that officers of color are doing better in some of these exams. Now that some police departments have changed the exam structure in the city of Boston, changed their exam structure, and police departments really have to lean into making sure that they truly want to get to a place of inclusivity. You know, there are a lot of other barriers that come into place, like seniority and other measures that police departments use for promotion that historically have disenfranchised officers of color. But we know today there is an opportunity to make sure that at all levels, officers of color are represented, not only when they walk in the door, but also as they climb the ladder within policing. And, you know, the city of Boston just recently celebrated one of the most diverse police classes that graduated from the Boston Police Academy, but that's just one step to getting us to a true place of equity. It's now how do we get people promoted to the rank of sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and beyond to make sure that the police department is inclusive all around, because that not only helps internally, but it helps how we engage with the communities that we serve.
For sure. And Oren, I know that, you know, you field a lot of these phone calls where officers are, or I mean, even other departments, you know, the fire department is not without its challenges. We're talking about making sure that there's equity and balance and diversity and things like that. Do you see this sort of creating momentum to create a more equitable space along all sort of civil service positions?
Absolutely. What it really shows and what this conversation really reveals is that it's got to be an all-hands-on-deck effort if we're really serious about diversity in the police department, in the fire department, and in other institutions. It's got to go beyond just the platitudes of saying we value diversity, but looking at diversity in all aspects, from how people get into the system, what outreach is done to bring people onto the force, what barriers exist to promotional opportunities, how are people being retained. All of those aspects have to be evaluated and analyzed and worked at. And this victory that we've achieved here is one piece of that. We hope it brings more momentum to move into some of those other places in the future as well.
All right. Well, Oren Sellstrom and Jenifer Lopes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Federal prosecutors are looking into a widespread network of what they called high-end brothels in Massachusetts and New England. Prosecutors brought charges against 3 people earlier this month for allegedly running the brothels, where they say elected officials, military officers, and other prominent figures bought sex, and more charges are likely to follow here. The case is reigniting conversations about the way that the criminal justice system handles these types of cases, particularly when it comes to sex workers, who are the most punished and imprisoned group in the sex trade, despite facing high rates of sexual violence and human trafficking. A group of state lawmakers and advocates argue that the solution is to decriminalize sex work, but still hold buyers and exploiters accountable. They're behind a new bill called the Sex Trade Survivors Act to do just that. 2 of the activists backing that bill join me right now to discuss. Audra Doody is the co-executive director of Safe Exit Initiative, and Audrey Morrissey is co-executive director of the nonprofit My Life, My Choice. I'm also joined by Deputy Investigative Editor Jenifer McKim, who has been covering this story for GBH News. I mean, I think, Jenifer, when we're seeing the very latest of this being this federal investigation. It comes to mind for folks, but certainly this is not a topic that has gone away at any point, and there's been rallying support around this bill.
Exactly. No, this has been something, as these two women know too well, this has been a problem that's been in Massachusetts and across the country for decades and too often ignored. And we at GBH have done a lot of coverage of this with our other colleague, Philip Martin. We've written about illicit massage businesses. We've written about young women who are trafficked in the streets of Boston. We've written about boys who are also being brought in and exploited and trafficked. So it is a huge problem, and this federal case does bring a lot of questions about what is happening here in Massachusetts.
And Audrey, I'll ask you, you've been an advocate for a long time in the greater Boston area, and when you see cases like this recent federal investigation, I mean, what goes through your mind?
Why aren't they holding the buyers accountable? You know, and as you said, I've been doing this for 21 years, and every time there is a sting to this magnitude, you will see the names of the exploiters, or you'll see pictures of the women who were caught in the sting, but we never see the actual buyers. And so for me, what I do know to be true is that that is the greater problem, because if people didn't buy people, then people wouldn't sell people.
Audra, talk to me about how decriminalizing will help the victims in this situation. Being the sex workers, right, that are being charged.
Yes, they would get them connected to exiting services, but it would be a partial decriminalization because you have to remember we're still holding the buyers and the pimps and the brothel owners accountable, so it's not full decriminalization, so I just wanted to clear that up real quick. But it would get them connected to exiting support services, which a lot of the women or people in the life, they don't even know that that exists.
What is that for folks who may not know?
Supportive exiting services,
Yeah.
It's My Life, My Choice, it's Safe Exit Initiative, it's survivor leaders coming together and creating safe places through domestic violence shelters, safe houses, and that's exiting support services.
And this would help the sex workers in this situation by partially decriminalizing it. It would give them access to those services.
Yes, and it would stop criminalizing them and making them the problem, right? They're the victims of this crime, and they don't need to be criminalized for these actions.
Jenifer, what has been some of the criticism, I guess, to this type? I think when people hear you're going to decriminalize sex work, they think of something different. They don't think of, oh, it's going to give access to services.
Well, I think everybody's, well, there's so many comments that we hear. It's the oldest profession, and and so people say I think there is a lot of argument that, why are people in the federal government spending this much time going after a brothel bust that looks like consensual adults working together? So I think that's one of the issues that we often hear from the background when these types of things come up.
Yeah. I think, Audrey, you made a really good point about how when these arrests happen or these roundups happen, you see the picture of the women, oftentimes they are women, who are being charged with the crime. But there are, it seems like you just get the printed list, at least when we, as journalists cover it. When you have someone enter into the law enforcement system like that in this way, what kind of effect can it have on their lives?
Oh my God, housing, employment, and what I want to say is that My Life, My Choice, we work with youth under the age of 18, and the term sex worker is totally inappropriate for a child. But when we talk about adult women, like anything else, when they pull your Corey, and Massachusetts has done a lot of work, but still needs to do a lot of work around the Corys, how
Criminal history.
Yes, their criminal histories, and people can't find jobs, housing, and so you'll hear, like, if a person can't get those things, then you're going to hear more of those stories around, I'm doing this to survive. But I will say, the adult women that I've worked with, they're all for a partial decrim. They are not open for a full decrim. And what people don't understand is full decrim means pimping will be legal, brothel owning will be legal, and buying people will be legal. And what our bill is doing, and I do want to add that the Attorney General has signed on to our bill, and our bill is for all survivors and their safety and the ability, if needed, for them to gain services. I know when I was in the life, there was a process for me to basically learn how to live again, right? And we want to make our bill is in support. I don't care whether you were recruited in the life, whether you're doing it because you choose to. We want the equal rights of all survivors, and with our bill to, expunging records, different programs supporting them in their journey, because what I do know is that if people had good jobs, housing, access to education, a lot of them would not be in the commercial sex industry.
Audrey, you were, nodding vehemently. Has that been experienced with the folks that you're working with?
Definitely. And the shame and the stigma that goes along with being in the life and being a prostituted woman. So when you find a community of other women that have experienced, or other people that have experienced the same situations as you, and they come from the life, it's just, for me, that was a huge part of my healing process. I don't believe it's any little girl's dream to be prostituted, right? I believe it's their vulnerabilities. I believe it's a choice for the people with the fewest choices. Again, like Audrey was saying, like homelessness, employment, poverty, all those factors add into people entering the life. So I agree 100%. I think the shame and stigma along with this, and then the criminalization, they go hand in hand, and we need to stop blaming them and treating the victims as criminals.
Factors, whether it be if you were trafficked. I know part of your backstory is that you were trafficked in the combat zone and then ended up in the life, as you say, those kinds of things. Do you think a bill like this will help get to some of those issues?
Oh, yeah. Well, what this bill will put up front is you will see the high number of Black and brown people who are in the life and not by choice. And so that's why I fight so hard for this bill. I know that there are people out there that, this is my choice, they're in college, and for them that, when they decide that they want to get out of the life, they probably could. But who we see at My Life, My Choice, and even my encounters with other survivor-led organizations here in Boston that work with adult women, the Black and brown people are sold at a higher rate, and they do not have a choice. And they are one of the most vulnerable populations. And the other thing that I want to say about that, just like anything else in our society, Black and brown people are sold for a lower rate. Black and brown person, their value to a buyer is not the same as a white woman who would be in the life. And so I feel that this bill will really help Black and brown children, Black and brown adults find a safe way to live, get those records cleared, housing, employment, education, and I would guarantee if we had put all those things forth, people would not decide that this is the only way that I can survive.
Well, Jenifer, I want to ask you, in talking to lawmakers and other elected officials, other folks like that, about the aim for this bill, is part of it helping to change some of that, what can be a pipeline into this, commercial sex industry as Audrey described it?
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to say, I think what they're also talking about is there's some dueling bills in the legislature right now. One that is pushing for decriminalizing the selling of sex, and one that would fully decriminalize sex buyers and folks like the pimps. And the arguments among those people, who also include people with lived experience in trafficking, is that they think that it makes it more dangerous when there is a criminal part involved. But it looks to me right now, anyway, in terms of legislation, that their legislation has a lot more support in the legislature, because I think it's probably a lot more manageable for most people in the community to move that type of level. There is a similar bill that was passed in Maine just recently, the first in the country that did that, decriminalize just for the sellers of sex. So that's what's going on right now. And I think Massachusetts is really, what I've heard is that it's in the forefront in this discussion in the country. So Maine has passed a law. I think Massachusetts is looking at it very closely. New York is also looking at it. So we'll see in the next couple months what happens.
Audra, I'm thoughtful about things like, and I'm thinking of social media and things like that, where there's almost a glamorization of sex work. And I wonder if that hurts the work that you and Audrey and organizations like both of yours are doing to help women who are trying to leave this life and rebuild their lives.
Of course it hurts our women, it hurts our whole population. They glamorize it, especially OnlyFans, TikTok. You see these young girls all over social media talking about how much money they got, what's in my bag. And to a 12, 13-year-old girl like myself, when I was growing up, I would have thought that was cool and glamorous, right? Like, I wanted the new shoes. I grew up in poverty. I wanted nice things. So if that's what I had to do to get them, like, I'm gonna look at OnlyFans and be like, oh, that's not bad. I'm behind a camera, I'm safe. Well, guess what? You're not safe behind a camera also. It's very dangerous to online exploitation. And once those images are out there, they're out there forever. So I would like to remind little girls that also.
Yeah, Audrey, I mean, I'm sure that you see it and you're like, this is gonna work against me in the work that you're doing.
Well, My Life, My Choice, we work with kids.
You do, yeah.
And so I don't think, and my hope is that your viewers, and whether you're in the life because you've been exploited or because this is your choice, that you know that this is no industry for children. And what I want to say about that, anywhere that there is an adult sex industry, there are always children. There's no way to even have this industry without young people being involved. And, you know, and the glamour of, you know, you have rappers who used to be strippers, right? And now they're multi-millionaires, and not to, those are my people, but that's not the reality. And again, what we're talking about, those aren't the people that My Life, My Choice serves. And Audra, if I asked you, I'm sure these are not the women that you serve.
No.
Yeah, well, we'll be following this bill and its progress, and of course all of the reporting that Jenifer and your team is doing as well. Audra Doody, Audrey Morrissey, Jenifer McKim, very similar names. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, and that's it for tonight. But come back tomorrow. I'm Crystal Haynes. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.